So this presentation is fairly short. It's just really a check for organisations in the manufacturing space who might want to go on the digital transformation journey. My name's John Broadbent. I'm the founder of a company called Realise Potential, and I have a background in manufacturing. This is my 49th year, so next year's my 50th, and I'm still here. Plenty of grey hair to prove that the journey was not necessarily easy along the way. But what got me started in this space back in 2017 was this splash page from Cisco that 75% or three-quarters of IoT projects are failing. And it was like, wow, why is that, considering we've been collecting data from the edge and doing stuff with it for almost 30 years? What's going on here? So I started to do some research, and that's Realise Potential as a business actually came out of this initial interest that I had. And what I discovered is that in 2017, it was estimated there were 8.4 billion things on the planet. And a thing is something we can get information from, a computer, a device, a system in a factory, a robot, for example. By 2020, it was estimated at 30 billion, and by 2025, it's estimated to be 82 billion. And that's 10 billion, sorry, that's 10 things for every person, man, woman, and child on the planet. So as you can see, in the last 8 years, it's gone up by a factor of 10. So this is obviously going to be exponential growth. And this has really been the underpinning of what's become known as the fourth industrial revolution. So I want to take you on a 30-second Cook's tour of what the fourth industrial revolution is actually all about. If we go back to 1784 and good old James Watt and the steam engine, I'm from Yorkshire, so the weaving loom was a part of Bradford, a part of my upbringing, where my dad was actually a carpet weaver. So 1784, we had steam power, James Watt, the weaving loom, and really it was the mechanisation phase of what we know as the first industrial revolution. And then in 1870, electrification came along, the battle between Edison and Tesla. Tesla won. And organisations then making a choice then to move on to electricity, and we saw obviously the revelations that created for us in manufacturing in the years that ensued that. Then in 1969, just as Neil Armstrong was walking on the moon, and electronics and transistors were starting to become popular, early days of programming and rooms full of stuff that were called computers. That was the beginning of what was known as the third industrial revolution. And then in 2011, Germany coined the term Industry 4.0 as the fourth industrial revolution, which was really a combination of three major components. And those components are really at a convergence back in 2011, and we're seeing the effect of that now on manufacturing. So fundamentally, Industry 4 sits on top of three converging technology sets, I guess you'd call them, and one is a thing called cyber-physical systems. A lot of people are confused by these, but if you imagine your car is collecting thousands of signals from its engine management system, assuming you have a petrol or diesel powered vehicle, your dashboard is a cyber-physical system. It's a way of taking information from the cyber world and putting it into a dashboard so that we can see what's going on. And obviously the advent of cloud computing has become so ubiquitous now that we take it for granted. We don't care when we use our phone and do our banking or anything else that we do, where the main application sits. Is it on someone's server somewhere? Is it in a cloud? And the industrial Internet of Things is the third leg of that, which is all the stuff that we would find in a manufacturing environment. Control systems, robotics, palletizers, pieces of machinery, databases, like a whole range of bits and pieces that we can find in a typical manufacturing environment. The reason this is important is that as these three technologies have combined, it's allowed us to make much better decisions in a shorter space of time, rather than having to go down to factories and get paperwork and put that into spreadsheets, good old MES, manufacturing, many Excel spreadsheets. We're now finding organisations are able to do a lot more with the information that they're collecting when it's collected in real time and electronically. If we look at a time span from year to second, I found in my experience that the day is an interesting delineator between two very separate worlds. On the left-hand side, in the bigger chunks of time, we have what are known as lag measures, and these are rear view, profit and loss, variance, attainment, make to plan, balance sheets, all those sorts of things that come out of the information that we collect, but often delivered days, weeks, sometimes months after the event. And this is what I call the realm of business intelligence. And in fact, if you look at the research that was done on investments in business intelligence in the last decade or so, the biggest complaint that was made is that the information on the investment or from the investment was not timely enough. So people were still acting very much in the rearview mirror. And lag measures, people don't realise are also outputs of a process. They're the result of something. If we shift to the right-hand side of this delineation of the day and we get into the shift hour, minute, second space, we start to move into the realm of lead measures. These are things that we can measure in real time or near real time. And I call this the realm of manufacturing intelligence. And as we shift into this space, what we actually do organically is we increase the velocity or the agility of the business in order for it to respond to changing conditions, whether it's changing manufacturing conditions, supply chain holdups, whatever it is. And so the whole idea of moving into the manufacturing intelligence space is to deliver the right information to the right people at the right time in the way that they want to consume it. So what I've found over time is, how do I know whether an organisation is ready to embark on their digital transformation journey? So there's really 5 questions that an organisation can ask itself. And some of these are well-known social science constructs that I've used as my litmus test to assess the readiness of a business to go on this journey. It's almost like, is the organisation at base camp 0, and do they have all the kit and equipment and resources needed to climb the summit? And a lot of them, unfortunately, attempt to climb it in shorts and thongs and a day pack, only to find they stumble along the way. The first one is known as the law of diffusion of innovation. And it really starts with how an idea travels through our society. Right at the nose, or the bull nose of this bell curve, we have the 2.5% of people that are known as the innovators. They're the ones who'll take risks. They'll sit up outside the Apple store till 3 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the next iPhone. And they're sort of the tech enthusiasts, the digital natives. Followed in behind them, we have the early adopters, which sits at about 13.5%. And those two really form the bull nose of an idea as it travels through society. If it gets through those two, then the early majority, 34%, will come on board, followed by the late majority, which is another 34%. And then we have the good old laggards at the back, who will eventually get there only if they have to. And what we found is that the tipping point is really at this 16% mark. Malcolm Gladwell talks about the tipping point. And usually when an idea gets to that tipping point, only then will the idea carry through to society and become mainstream. I can share with you right now, not from any research, but just from my own empirical and others' evidence, is that right now we're still in the enthusiast phase of Industry 4.0 and digital transformation of manufacturing. Germany, Siemens announced a few months ago in Germany, they believe that only 4% of German manufacturing is on this journey. I believe in Australia it's less than 1%. So that's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's sad that it's only 1%, but on the other hand, if you haven't yet started, you can still jump in and get the early adopter competitive advantage. So it's really up to an organisation to decide if this is a journey they want to take. The second part is really, as an organisation, what is the alignment in your business? I was taught this back in 2005 when I approached Sanitarium to help them integrate SAP with their factory floor, which is my background specialty at the time. And they said, yep, we want what you're selling. Come and see us in 12 months. I was like, why so long? And they said, because we know that the data in our SAP system is dirty. And if we're going to push that down onto the factory floor untouched by a human hand and without that human oversight, we're going to create an absolute mess. So they taught me the lesson that it's not about the systems, it's about a close alignment between people, processes, and the systems which we implement. And I'm sure many of us have seen organisations go out and buy a system without any regard for the people and process component, and the system inevitably fails, not because it's technically wrong, simply because its rate of adoption or the type of adoption never really takes hold because the people and processes weren't aligned in the first place. So that's the second question, is how aligned are you as an organisation across those 3 areas? The third question is really related to a construct known as the hierarchy of competence. So I want you to imagine that you're 10 years old, you're sitting in the passenger seat, your mum or dad's driving the car, and as far as you're aware, driving is really, really easy. They're staring out the window, they're listening to the radio, they're having a conversation. They're not really paying that much attention, or at least you think they're not paying that much attention to the road front. So as far as you're concerned, driving is an absolute piece of cake. And at that point in your life, you are unconsciously incompetent. In other words, you don't know what you don't know. Then the day comes, you go down to the registration office and you get your L's, and you get behind the wheel of the car and you suddenly sit behind it for the first time, and you suddenly realise, oh my goodness, clutches, brakes, indicators, rear view mirrors, all the instrumentation, steering, all the observations I have to make. This is really hard. I now know that I am consciously incompetent. I now know that I don't know how to drive. We get our red Ps eventually, we get our green Ps, and during that sort of 2 to 3 year period, we have to really focus on what we're doing and how we drive the car. So we have to really, really pay attention. At that point, we are consciously competent. We're thinking about what we're doing. We know that we know, but we really have to still focus and concentrate on it. And then eventually we become our mum or dad. And I'm sure many of us here have driven somewhere and not actually remembered how we actually got there at the end of the drive, but we know we were paying some attention. And at that point, we're unconsciously competent. In other words, we don't know that we know. When a man called Glenn Garner from Honeywell was sent around the South Pacific Basin to look for a correlation between best practice and automation, which of course Honeywell wanted to show the correlation because it would help them sell their automation platforms, what he found was there was no correlation between automation and best practice. But what he did find was that all the best practice companies were unconsciously competent. They didn't know that they were just so good at what they did because the culture, systems and processes and everything that was in place ensured that people were aligned with that. But the clincher for me is that when Glenn Garner said, if you try and push an organisation from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, all you will meet is hostility. No one likes to be told they don't know. And this was such a revelation for me that I came back to my business, got my team together, and we segmented our customers into these bands, and all the customers in the unconsciously incompetent band we let go. And when we reflected on all the projects that we'd done that had performed exceptionally well, they were all in the conscious incompetence band. They'd recognised they now needed to know that they didn't know, and they'd come to us for a solution to their problem, and we then in a partnership situation helped them and held their hand while they started that journey. So that's really my third litmus test. If they're a consciously incompetent business, they're not ready for the digital transformation journey because they don't know that they don't know. A couple of years ago, I also put together a video series on LinkedIn, and episode 6 took me 3 months to ponder because I was meeting a guy who was a sales and marketing director for a large company known as PTC. And he was waxing lyrical over coffee once a month about why organisations weren't buying his platform. So episode 6 was called It Ain't About the Platform. And what I realised is, as I sat with and pondered for that 3-month period, why don't organisations go out there and buy this stuff and help them do the enablement piece? And I realised it was because fundamentally behind all this, there's a decision tree that organisations don't even understand is there in their mindset. But when you think about it, it really explains why the platform is not the first decision that an organisation makes. And the first question I asked organisations, and sometimes a little bit shocked by it, is, do you want to be best in class? Conscious pause, Judith. Do you actually want to be best in class? A lot of organisations never ask themselves that question. No, we're happy to be down the food chain in terms of who we are and what we do. But a lot of organisations do want to be best in class. They've just never asked themselves. Sadly, there are other organisations out there who think they are. They actually don't know what best in class looks like because for 25 years they've worked in the one organisation, and so they've never left the 4 walls or gone to any business networking or joined any best practice networks to go and see what other organisations are doing. And I've dealt with a few of those in recent years, which pride themselves on their longevity of their employees and their low staff turnover. But fundamentally, it's again another double-edged sword because it affects the fact that people in the organisation don't actually know what best in class looks like. On a conversation with a large organisation last year, the executive general manager of operational excellence, halfway through a call talking about digital transformation, said to me, you know, you're not convincing me that this is a journey we need to take. And I was like, whoa, hang on a minute here. I'm not here to convince you of anything. If your leadership is not committed to the digital transformation journey, it's of no consequence to me. That's not for me to convince you of anything. So for an organisation to go on the digital transformation journey, whether it's sales, marketing, supply chain, manufacturing, the organisation itself has to be led and committed to the journey of digital transformation. And when he got off the call, the guy that was left behind who initiated the call wanted to do these sneaky pilots to prove at the ground floor level through these little pilots that there was money to be saved. And I said to him, I have a question for you. In your lifetime, do you want to climb Mount Everest? And he was, why are you asking me that? I said, well, it's a simple question. Do you want to climb Mount Everest or say Mount Kilimanjaro in your lifetime? And he said, well, why are you asking me that? I said, because it's a simple answer, yes or no. If the answer is yes, well, then you work out how to do it, what flights to get, what tour guides to look for, what fitness training you might have to do, what equipment to buy. I said, it's the same with digital transformation. You either say, yes, you want to do it, or no, you don't, or not now, and that's okay too. But you need to have a leadership that's committed to the concept of digital transformation and understand what that is. If you do that, have you then identified some low-hanging fruit? Some opportunity, cost versus benefit? Have you looked at your P&L and seen where your large cost items are? Power, water, gas, utilities, raw material, and labour. And do you know in your standards and your standard costing models where the soft spots are? That you could certainly gain some significant amount of return on investment by doing that. Fifth question is, do you have the resources? You may have the time, you may have the money. Do you have the expertise? Or should you be looking to step outside and try and find someone external who might have the additional expertise that you need? I've seen many organisations attempt this journey in a part-time capacity when people are already at capacity, and it just doesn't work. Sixth question is, do you have the knowledge? Again, do you need to look external, get some training, get some education, understand what digital transformation and Industry 4 is and isn't, and get the knowledge that you need in order to do this well. And finally, and only then, can you ask yourself the question, do I need to choose a vendor, a partner, or a platform, and now do some proof of value, not proof of concept pilots? And the reason I say proof of value is proof of concept is, can we collect data, do something with it and display it in a dashboard? Absolutely, we've been doing it for 30 years. But can I, if I do that, will I make a significant difference to the bottom line profitability of the business? And it's the CFO ultimately who's going to sign off on these. So better to have a proof of value pilot than a proof of concept pilot. And the final one is, where are you on the Industry 4 maturity journey? Industry 3.0 and the closeout of Industry 3.0 is having equipment in your manufacturing environment that is both computerized and connected. An example I'll use is a check weigher. For those of you that know anything about food and beverage, most organisations have these things called check weighers that weigh every pack or jar as it comes across after production before it's finally packaged. And you can go down to the check weigher and you can program the check weigher and you can get information off the check weigher with a USB stick. That's Industry 3.0. Industry 4.0 is being able to connect that piece of equipment to a network and abstract that information so that you can see the information remotely. That's step one of the Industry 4 journey, being able to see the information remotely, like having the dashboard in your car. If I'm weighing 500 gram trays of food and they're anything from 495 grams to 520 grams, I'm getting the real-time weight. Where do I get the standard from that tells me what that should be? Where's the context? If I'm sitting in my car and my speedo is showing me I'm doing 60 kilometers an hour, what's the relevance? Am I in a 40 school zone where I'm going to get into trouble? Or am I on a 110 kilometre an hour freeway where I'm also going to get into trouble, but for different reasons? So the second step is to get the reference externally to give the information that we're collecting context so that we can understand the value of that in reference to something else. Step 3 then means, well, I'm now collecting the data. I look ahead when I'm driving my car and I now see I'm going from an 80 zone to a 60 zone, so I know I'll have to make a change, I have to prepare to slow down. In manufacturing, for example, using the checkweigher example, we could be collecting this data in real time, using a proper statistical process control sampling regime and building what's known as an SPC chart and looking at the natural variation in our weights. But suddenly, for some reason, the production goes a little bit weird, and we now can see our weights over sampling time start getting heavier and heavier and heavier to the point that we're heading for an out of specification limit. In the prepare phase or the predicting phase, we know we're going to make out of spec product. We will reach out to someone and we will get them to go and make an adjustment. That's step 3. It's the predicting piece. Finally, the holy grail is to get to step 4 and optimize. It is looking at the SPC chart via a supervisory control system through machine learning or AI and going, I know I'm about to make out of spec product. I will tell electronically the filling machine or the filling system at the front end to start making adjustments. And this is the closed loop of the Industry 4 maturity path. And this is the place where the whole machine learning and AI models then really start to optimize what it is that we're manufacturing. So they're really the 5 steps of the Industry 4 maturity path, and really where are you on each of those constructs as a business. And this particular step is all about then an edge enablement, and a lot of Australian manufacturers haven't yet enabled that edge by getting the equipment and information that they have in a method or form that they can consume it in a healthy way and then start that journey. So my job generally is to talk to them about the edge enablement piece and assess where they are on that journey. This is a graph from a guy called Walker Reynolds, who I follow in the United States, and I love it because it talks about where we were in terms of return on investment over time. And you can see in that bottom left-hand corner where we used to follow Kaizen as the sort of Lean and Six Sigma school, and now we're into this Kaikaku, the breakthrough, where sort of the old game and new rules, and then up the top we're now ready for that Kakushin, the disruptive space, where it's basically a new game and new rules. And the way to think about this is, this came from a company called LNS Research, and I absolutely love it because it explains that in a very simple matrix. Imagine that we're still stuck in our business recording spreadsheets, and out of that we're building graphs, and we're sharing that somehow within our organisation, often hours or days after the event. This is where we are with our Excel spreadsheets and getting what are known as old answers to old questions. We then got smart with ERP systems and we started to build data cubes. So we started to get more complex in the way that we could store our data and analyze our data. So then we started to get new answers to old questions. Now, however, we're moving along the horizontal axis, and we're starting to improve our capacity for analytics. And we're now starting to get old answers to new questions. But the holy grail really is up in this top right-hand corner, which is now getting new answers to new questions. And certainly machine learning and AI is going to help us do that, and that's really the realm of innovation. And very few organisations that I know of are actually operating in that quadrant at the moment. They might be moving up the left-hand side, but they're certainly not moving much along the horizontal side because they just can't get access to the data. So my view is, as an organisation, if you want to predict the future, as Peter Drucker says, how about we create it? I do implore organisations that sadly there is a high cost of doing nothing. And so my contribution to the marketplace is my own 4-tiered engagement model, where I take organisations along a 4-stepped path where I look at leadership alignment during a keynote. I can then do workshops for the team's education to make sure and tease out from them what the perceived issues are. I can then do a readiness assessment for the business itself to see where they are in terms of that whole matrix I've just described of business maturity, and then take on a part-time advisory role for the organisation to help them create and execute the strategy that we then put together. So my question to manufacturing in Australia is, what are you waiting for? Feel free to reach out to me for those that haven't or watched this recording, those that haven't yet reached out to me on LinkedIn. I'm very active in the education space on LinkedIn, and I will send you a copy of the Industry 4 white paper that talks about how to use Industry 4 to improve your manufacturing performance. So thank you all for your time and attention.